Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Jacqui Van Ham, your girl in the know for all things motorcycle. Welcome to your Choppertown Daily, your all things motorcycle program, your Friday afternoon show. Welcome back everybody, welcome back to all of our regular viewers and top fans. Welcome back everybody, welcome back. I just wanted to go ahead and do a little field trip today and come on down to my workshop. I figured, the past couple of, since the whole Corona started, I kind of have been doing a series of engine basics. I don't know if you've catched those programs or not. You can always go click over to my Jacqui Van Ham official page here on Facebook. Bam! Just like that. Go click on over, check out my page because I move all of my videos over there and they're all in one neat and tidy place. You can go watch all of my previous shows. Anywho, so we've been discussing some engine basics out here. So we've covered, what have we covered? We've covered cams and we've covered cranks. I talked a little bit about rocker arms on one of the shows, not last week because I was out of town, but maybe 2 weeks ago now. I talked about rocker arms on my show, and it was, are you ready to rock? With rocker arms. I know, that's a terrible dad joke, but it's also, it's the month of Father's Day, so I gotta squeeze my dad jokes in there where I can. Anyway, so I figured we would carry on a little bit further into that topic of rocker arms, and I covered what they do, but now I wanted to go a little bit into valves, because rocker arms have everything to do with valves. Valves are obviously well, maybe not obviously. I know I've got a lot of kind of new mechanics and new motorcyclists watching the show. So valves open and close the intake and exhaust parts of your engine. They're what let air in, and they're what push that spent mixture out in the very simple version of that. So I figured we go ahead and talk about valves a little bit today. As always, I can see your comments, so feel free to peek in and say, hey, let me know how the show is going out there. If it looks good, sounds good. Like I said, I'm trial running my laptop here at the workshop, courtesy, huge thanks to Choppertown and you guys for watching. I was able to get Wi-Fi installed down here. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. So let's get started. So the very first slide on your screen is obviously kind of a simplification of a basic engine. And it's got, you can see the piston, you can see the crank at the bottom, you can see the timing chain which connects up to the cams. The cams are those double overhead guys up there, those two things up at the very top. Those overheads open and close the exhaust and the intake. In both concept and practice, the motorcycle valve mechanism of any four-stroke engine is pretty straightforward. Essentially, valves act as the doors to the combustion chamber, allowing the fresh mix to flow in during the intake stroke, sealing the chamber during the compression and power strokes, and providing an exit for the spent gas during the exhaust stroke. Despite the harsh environment in which they live, valves require relatively little routine maintenance. The average valve requires nothing more than a periodic clearance, or lash as it's called, inspection, and the occasional adjustment to stay happy. Tasks well within the grasp of those even with little mechanical skill. Anytime a valve is closed, there needs to be a gas-tight seal between the valve seat located in the cylinder head and the valve face. To ensure the valve is fully seated, there must be some slight valve clearance, or lash, between the valve stem and the rocker arm or cam. Think of it as a little bit of free play, similar to that which exists in a clutch or throttle cable. Lash may be adjusted manually via a screw, a shim, or automatically by a hydraulic device. As the engine warms to operating temperature, the various metals inside the engine grow slightly due to thermal expansion. As the valve train components are brought up to running temperature, they expand along with all of the other bits and pieces. If there is insufficient lash between the valve stem and its actuating mechanisms when the engine is cold, there will be even less clearance when the engine is hot. So what they're going over there is what they're talking about is the valve, which is that kind of trumpet-shaped piece that you saw on the previous slide. I've got one of my BMW engines here, and you can see these are the springs that help actuate that valve as it goes in and out. This is the valve stem, this piece right here. And this is what this rocker arm, here we go, this rocker arm makes contact with this valve stem and pushes it up and down. I should say it pushes it down and then the spring makes it go back. But you understand what I'm saying. So the trumpet part is on this side of the cylinder head. So they're in there really good, so you can't really see much differentiation, but you can see that that's a valve in here, that's a valve in here. They're flat and they splay out like that, kind of like a trumpet shape. Now I gotta wipe my hands off because that cylinder was pretty greasy and I'm working on my brand new computer. So anyway, so what they're talking about is, again, that rocker or cam or whatever mechanism is gonna be pushing on that valve stem. Remember, the trumpet shape is down here and it's gonna be pushing it in to the cylinder head, which is called lift. Now, there's always going to be a gap here because as that engine warms up, all these different metals expand ever so slightly, right? So if there wasn't a gap, they'd be stuck together, and that means as it goes in and out, it can't close all the way. And that's the important part, is making sure that there's a seal in that cylinder in order to get the most complete combustion, as well as the cleanest. As if it's an exhaust, you know, it has to like open all the way while the intake is closed, because that way there's not any mixing of gas. And anyway, it's just very important that they open and close completely. So if they were too close together, they wouldn't have the opportunity to close back all the way. They would get stuck on this rocker, right? So let's get back to the slides. If the valve clearance is reduced beyond a reasonable amount, several unpleasant things occur. First, the valve timing is changed slightly, and this may affect performance and emission outputs. But there is an added complication. The exhaust valve stays alive because it's able to transfer a fair portion of the heat it absorbs from the combustion process directly into the cylinder head when it's resting on its seat. As clearance is reduced, the valves spend less time on their seats. This means the exhaust valve has less time to give up its heat, leading to anything from detonation, pre-ignition, and engine overheating to a warped or burnt valve. Finally, if the clearance is removed altogether, the valves may be held some slight distance from the valve seat, thus reducing or even eliminating the seat-to-valve face contact area, allowing combustion gases to leak past. Hopefully at that point the engine won't start and the valves will receive some long overdue attention. If the engine still has enough compression to start up and run, the likely scenario is an overheated exhaust valve, followed shortly by a torched exhaust valve and then a long tow home. Valves can lose clearance by any number of reasons. The most common is the seat recession. Seat recession occurs as the valve pounds itself into the valve seat, reducing operating clearance. At one time, lead was added to fuel to prevent detonation. Nowadays, the valve seat recession is most commonly a factor only on new bikes or very high mileage bikes. Loose valves create less of a problem, although if they become too loose, mechanical damage between the valve stem and its adjuster may occur. Loose valves tend to make a lot of noise. They also hammer themselves and the other valve train components, accelerating wear. In an extreme case, a loose valve in a pushrod engine may let the pushrod fall away from the rocker arm and destroy itself, as well as some other very expensive bits. Generally, loose valves occur due to normal physical wear between the components. If a valve develops a sudden affinity for large clearances, start looking for wear at the camshaft, rocker arm tip, or perhaps a collapsed or damaged pushrod. Out-of-adjustment valves can make themselves known in a variety of ways, the most common being a distinct clatter from the valve area indicating loose valves, while tight valves may cause hard starting and poor idle. So again, like I was talking about, it's super important to make sure all of these things are in the correct alignment, because it's just, you have to make sure that there is, of course, going to be that really, really great complete seal. But it's also, if you think about it, these valves are being slammed open and closed and open and closed and open and closed every time you drive and run your bike or your engine. So it's taking just a pounding and taking a beating. But that being said, while the heads are made of aluminum, your valve seats are made of a much harder material. That way they can withstand all of that opening and closing and pounding and pounding. That being said, though, just as a side note, we covered earlier on a different program, the whole point of the cam and why the cam is that ovoid shape is because that way it more gently, as it were, opens and closes and makes contact with either the push rod or the valve directly or what have you, as opposed to just, if it was just like two hard items smashing against each other, it would make that valve slam again. But since it rolls it open and rolls it close, as it were, it helps make it a little bit of a more gentle contact. So another type of way to adjust a valve or type of valve, the conversation I just had also pertains a lot to pushrod type valve systems, but this that I'm showing on the screen is a shim over bucket type system. So there's several different types, like I said, of valves. There's hydraulic tappets or lifters. There's desmodronic over on Ducati. There's screw and lock nut adjusters, which are going to be on pushrod type designs. This, however, is a shim over bucket. In this design, an inverted bucket sits over the valve stem, and the shim sits atop the bucket to create the necessary lash or gap. Remember, lash refers to the gap in between what is either making contact with the valve stem, either the rocker arm or the cam. So one can't really adjust the valve lash in this type of setup. To change the clearance, the shim is replaced with one of different thickness. Shims are readily available at most motorcycle shops and dealers. And a shim is literally just a very, very small piece of metal. And they come in all sorts of different thicknesses because every engine has its own specs. Every single engine is different. They all have different clearances and tolerances. So you have to go look at your owner's manual or look it up on the interwebs. There is no set one does everything type number out here. So before you start kind of going down this path and either checking your valves, which I have done just to make sure they're in proper clearance, or just flat out adjusting your valves, which are really easy to do, especially on, I'm gonna say BMW because I have them, but the cylinder heads are out in the open, so it's super, super easy to do. But if you decide to take this on yourself, just make sure you look online and make sure you find the correct specs for your machine. That's just a little additional information out there. But anyway, so we have a couple of different ways of adjusting those valves. The big speech that I just gave you at the beginning really refers a lot to the rocker type situation where you've got some nuts and bolts and things that you have to tighten and loosen in order to increase or decrease that gap. And then this shim situation, which I just mentioned. Shims are becoming more and more popular on motorcycles. The shim over bucket setup became the preferred method because engineers wanted to eliminate rocker arms. Rather than actuating valves with a rocker arm, the cam itself opens the valve. This lightens the valve train, which frees up horsepower, allows for more precise valve timing, and also leads to longer valve inspection and adjustment intervals because there are fewer parts to wear. Ever-improving valve seat metallurgy simultaneously helps. Extended valve adjustment intervals ease some of the pain caused by newer designs that require more time spent removing bodywork and tightly packaged engines with difficult access. There's a potential problem with shim over bucket adjusters in high-performance engines, however. There are times when an engine can spin so incredibly fast that the valve spring cannot snap the valve closed before the cam attempts to open it again. Effectively, for a split second, no load is placed upon the valve by the spring. The phenomenon is known as valve float. That lack of spring pressure, coupled with the rotational wiping action of the cam lobe, can actually shoot or scoot a shim out of its captive spot on top of the bucket, eliminating clearance entirely. So as you can see there, it's got the shim over bucket. The shim is sitting nicely where it's supposed to in its little designated area on top of the bucket. But a shim pop, or when it scoots or gets scooted over by that cam at high RPM, you can see now it's popping and lifting and scooting. So a way to fix that was by doing shims under the bucket. So it's the same kind of idea where the cam is making direct contact with the bucket, but now the shims are kind of hiding underneath that bucket. So that's kind of another way of going about the shim and bucket type of adjustment versus, the valves and push rods and all that kind of good stuff. So another thing to think about, though, while we're discussing all of these valves is, I've got to give a shout out to my two-stroke buddies here because they love to say valves are for toilets. And that's because two-stroke engine design is entirely different from the four-stroke engine in the fact that the way that the intake and exhaust ports are open and closed is actually not this at all. This is a 4-stroke thing, opening and closing. The way 2-stroke engines work are the ports are in the side of the cylinder, and it's the piston going up and down is what either exposes or closes those 2 ports. So here's the interesting thing. Just like the bucket over shim or bucket shim combination that we were just talking about, by using less parts like rockers, you're making things a lot simpler. There's less wear, there's less parts, which equate to less weight. So this is the conversation that 2-stroke folks like to have, is because we're getting rid of all that stuff. We're getting rid of the whole conversation of cams and push rods and drive trains and belts, and we're getting rid of the valves, and we're getting rid of all of that stuff. So this is why 2-strokes are especially interesting. 2-strokes aren't used very commonly anymore, but their design is still, I think, incredibly interesting because it gets rid of all that stuff, which makes them so exceptionally perfect especially for little things like dirt bikes and for smaller displacement engines, because now you have way less weight to engine ratio versus a 4-stroke engine. Now they make power completely differently, but I just think it's kind of an interesting thing to point out that there's 2 totally different ways to skin that cat. This whole valve conversation and cams and all of this stuff talks to the majority of you that have 4-stroke engines. But I don't want to forget my 2-stroke buddies out there, because I also ride 2-stroke bikes. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up and cover that in today's show as well. So that's what's going on for today. A little bit of conversation about valves. Like I said, this is just toe in the water. Valves get very, very, very different, and there's all sorts of different metals that the valves and the seats can be made of in order to improve their longevity or make them lighter, or there's hollow, or there's a lot of different styles out there depending on what you are doing with your specific machine. But it's really important to be aware of the basic concept of these valves as being the doors that open and close the intake and exhaust. So that was the too long didn't read version of it, is that valves are basically doors that open and close intake and exhaust, which lets your engine basically breathe and radiate and get rid of the heat that is in that combustion chamber. So they're really important. And they're also, if you've got a push rod or, a rocker style engine and you want to adjust it on your own, minus all the bodywork and things that you might have to dig out of on your particular bike, on older machines, they're really pretty straightforward, and I strongly encourage you to kind of give it a thought. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that's very, very common, especially with the older bikes like I ride, is that if I leave my BMW in particular parked on its side stand, so it's leaning to the left for longer than a day or two, any of the oil that is contained within that system starts weeping over to the left-hand side, and it will gradually make its way into the cylinder head. Now, that happens because at any one point, there's going to be a valve opened or closed, right? Because they work in unison. So if the intake is open, I'll call that open, then that means the exhaust is closed. So at any point, there's going to be access to that cylinder. So anyway, the oils will kind of leak down there. So when I get the bike upright and I start it, poof, a cloud of smoke comes out the left-hand side. Okay, don't panic if your bike does that. Now, something might very well really be wrong, but there's a really good chance that all that might be is the oil kind of going over there and weeping through those valves and making its way into the cylinder head. So it doesn't mean it's a total catastrophe, especially if it's just that poof of smoke and then it clears up. There's a very good chance that oil has just made its way into the cylinder head. So that's today's conversation about valves and about valve seats and about cylinders and I grabbed a little, oh God, that's heavy, a little Honda that I had laying around as well. So you can see the itty bitty little valves that go on in this little Honda. This is just a little 160, so they're super, super tiny. But I just wanted to bring that up on today's Fun Fact Friday. What do you guys think about that out there? So some good stuff going on, some fun stuff going on. I just wanted to go ahead and bring you another Engine Basics show. I know that there's an awful lot of new motorcyclists joining us now out here in motorcycle land, especially because of the Corona and COVID-19. Oh my goodness, I covered a couple of shows ago that dirt bike sales in particular are up 30% right now, which is totally crazy. And everybody that I've talked to as far as dealerships and things of that nature, you guys are buying bikes right now. So congratulations. Welcome to the family. If you're brand new, welcome to motorcycling. There's an awful lot of folks that are really interested in either having their own transport and that is fun and exciting, or they want to vacation a little bit with a dirt bike or just with a motorcycle in general right now. You know, the flights are weird, the airports are weird. People now more and more than ever, I mean, ever in recent memory, are buying RVs, campers, camper vans, toy haulers, ATVs, UTVs, side-by-sides. Dealerships are sold out of them right now because everybody is really interested in vacationing on their own terms right now. So congratulations. Congratulations to any of you who have gone out and bought some new toys right now. But also, I do know some of you are a little bit newer to mechanics, so that's why I want to do this show. It's just some basics to bring a little bit more understanding to some of us out here. So that's all it is, and I just wanted to go ahead and talk about a little bit of valves today. As I mentioned earlier, you can go check out my, there we go. You can go check out my page because I put all of my videos up over there. So you can go click down the thread and watch some previous shows as we talk about cylinders and pistons, and we cover all sorts of basics. So go check out those previous shows. Do feel free to slide into my comments and come say, hey, I can see your comments as we get going on along. And then as always, thank you for joining us on today's valve program, talking about valves and push rods and all sorts of good stuff. And as always, huge thank you to all of my partners. Thank you so much for Choppertown. Thank you so much for joining us over here on the Choppertown platform and all of our kick-ass social media. Thank you so much to my show partner, Vroom, vroomyourroom.com, the Vroom Retract Vac. The All Things Motorcycle podcast is up and running. Make sure you go check it out on Stitcher or Buzzsprout. Support the show by buying yourself a t-shirt at twostroketees.com. This month's event partner, She Rides Moto, going on next weekend, July 2nd through the 5th in beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Tennessee, right in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. This is a women's motorcycling event, so I'd love to see some of you women that watch the show there. Please do come on out and join us for kick-ass women with other kick-ass moto babes. This does all kind of take place, though, at the Smoky Mountain Harley-Davidson dealership, which, of course, is open to everybody, so we can all hang out together. So come on out and come say hey to us. Thanks again for watching, everybody. We appreciate you. Make sure you give me a follow over on the Instagram. It all goes down in the stories. Jacqui Van Ham and the Jacqui of all trades. Let's go back through the comments and say hello to some of you. I know I was busy doing a little bit of talking in here. Hey, Polly, thanks for tuning in. Bob Williams, welcome to the show. Nancy, thank you for watching. Jefferson, Brazil, hola, what's going on? Cortez from Flagstaff, Arizona. Kevin Turner from England, thank you for tuning in. Who else is on the show today? Dan Benson, one of my buddies down in Tennessee, thank you for watching. So as always, make sure you take a second and share this with all of your buddies. Got her shims together. Oh, Dan Benson with the dad joke. Bravo, Dan Benson. Bravo, Dan Benson. I do got my shims together over here. All right, what's going on? Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Do take a second. Feel free to share this video with all of your friends. I do love kind of spreading the gospel, spreading the knowledge of motorcycles out here. So take a second, hit that share button. Share this with any of your friends or pages or motorcycle pages. I appreciate you. The more eyeballs we get, the more I get to do what I get to do out here. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Ride safe no matter where you are out there in the world. See you guys next week.